Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Texas Rangers franchise on the MSM Sports Network. It's the year one offseason, the biggest episode that we've had, maybe of the entire franchise, is we really get to start building out this team. We've signed our draft picks, and now we get to upgrade this team through free agency and bring back the pieces that we want to now build a contender. Texas overachieved by getting to the American League Championship Series, and now we've got a chance to build off that momentum and head into the 2022 season with a fresh head of steam. Well, I had originally planned to do a live commentary through this offseason and give you my reactions as the moments unfolded, but unfortunately my audio software bugged, and instead of coming through the microphone, it actually came through my webcam, which didn't result in the best audio. But still, I think this is going to be a ton of fun in post-edit nonetheless, and this way I can give you the highlights and actually trim down the video even a little bit more. So the first thing that we needed to decide what we were doing was with our two exclusive free agents, and that was Charlie Culberson and Nick Vincent. Obviously, both of them played very, very well for us this season. Culberson coming off the bench kind of as that fifth infielder, and his attributes aren't regressing necessarily as much as you would think for a 32-year-old, especially in MLB The Show, and he had great numbers for us, and I would be willing to bring him back if he was okay with not earning as much money as maybe he might want at this stage of his career. He's not going to be a starter with us regardless of if we bring him back or not. I'm really looking for him to be a bench guy immediately. You see, he's going to want a lot of money. He performed well last season. He really has the attributes to be a starter. I just don't have a role for him in that capacity. So I tried to kind of move the money around to see if I could get him to take less than the 8.2 that he wanted. In the end, I don't think he's going to be willing to take that. For Nick Vincent, he had a phenomenal season, a career year, in fact, the best season of his entire career at age 35, which is incredible. But he's a 70 overall right now. He's regressing like crazy, and even though he did a tremendous job for us this season, he's not going to be a guy that I want to bring back long term, because I think the end of his career really is right around the horizon. You see his miles per hour on both fastballs, not even in the 90s anymore, so I'm not interested in bringing Nick Vincent back either. And in the end, I wouldn't negotiate with either exclusive free agent. I would look to see if Culberson would be available in free agency for a little bit less money, but I wasn't willing to pay him the 8.2 that he wanted. For the coaching staff, we offered Tim Dodge the role as manager, as Chris Woodward would end up getting promoted in the organization, no longer the manager. His attribute grades were just too bad. I couldn't bring back an F attribute grade manager if I really wanted this team to succeed. So we've actually promoted Chris Woodward. He will be a special assistant to baseball operations, and we're going to offer Tim Dodge the head coaching contract with the Texas Rangers, paying him a lot of money to come in and hopefully be a big asset to the team. He's only 41 years of age, and so, I think getting a younger manager in here will keep that youthful vibe around the team, and plus he has phenomenal attribute grades as well. For the hitting coaches, Luis Ortiz was promoted to director of hitting operations in the organization. I had to go around and look at different options, and there were a number of guys who I considered, but in the end I went ahead and offered Roderick Milano a 3-year, $6 million contract to be the hitting coach. Now, I know he is 65 years old, and he might retire on us before that 3 years is up. But again, you look at the attribute grades, and not only is he giving you a boost to power and contact, but also the plate discipline and plate vision. I'm trying to whittle down the number of strikeouts that we have as a team, and I think that Roderick and his attributes are a good boost to that. And you see Roderick the very next day accepts the Rangers' offer for the hitting coach for the 3 years, $6 million, and that would be the first step in our off-season process. Wanted to make sure that Dodge was going to commit to us, and he had some offers from St. Louis and Colorado, to be other coaches, not even a manager. He was the first base coach, I believe, for the Cardinals this last season, and he had an offer from the Rockies to be the first base coach as well. And as you see, Dodge actually accepts the Rockies' offer to be the first base coach. So he would rather take a lesser coaching position than be the manager of the Texas Rangers. I personally was absolutely stunned by that. Could not believe that he didn't accept that. So, as a result, we had to keep looking around. And again, there were some more offers out there on the table. And I looked at Jay Valdez, an A attribute grade. He does hurt you with the arm strength just a little bit, but the +3 contact was really attractive. Again, we want to put balls in play as an offense and continue to work on decreasing the number of strikeouts. He also had +1 to stamina. That'll help the pitching. And so we would go ahead and make Jay Valdez an offer to be a first-time manager, and I needed to be able to take him away from the San Diego Padres. For whatever reason, the Padres moved on from Jace Tingler after not making the postseason this last year, and they were in the market for a young manager as well. Valdez, just 39 years of age. He was the head coach at Louisville for the last 4 seasons, where he just won a national championship with Morris Cash, the right-handed pitcher that also went to the Rockies, if I'm not mistaken. And so we would give him the offer, continue to look around for other options, but in the end, Jay Valdez would be the guy that we settled on. While we wait on word from Jay Valdez and whoever is going to be our next manager with the Rangers, it's time to look at free agency, and this is a loaded class of absolute stars. Trevor Story is the headliner. Of course, he is a Dallas native from Irving, and he does have an offer from the Colorado Rockies, but I knew immediately that he was going to be a guy that we targeted to come be our franchise shortstop. I think that if we could get Story, we could move IKF back to third base where he won a Gold Glove, and not only do you lock down the left side of your infield in solid gold, but you also get the offense that Trevor brings. As you look at some of the other headliners, Carlos Correa, Javi Baez, Chris Bryant, Buster Posey hitting the market, Noah Syndergaard is leaving New York, so is Michael Conforto perhaps. So this was a star-studded free agency class, and I knew that we had to get this year right. With so many big names on the block, you could not swing and miss at some of these names and not be at a disadvantage going forward into the rest of free agency in the years to come. As you get a look at other names down the list, no doubt that there are so many all-stars on this list, but the guy that I wanted the most had to be Trevor Story. You look at the starting pitching, which we're in the market for as well, and guys like Charlie Morton, Carlos Martinez, Chris Archer, kind of that second tier of starters. And Charlie Morton was a guy that I was interested in potentially signing. The problem is his overall is falling off a cliff too. He's 38 years old, and I really feel like by the end of 2022, he could be in the low 70s just with how fast guys regress at this level. Relief pitchers, closing pitchers, some good ones. You scroll through, and the other area that I'm looking to upgrade, maybe in the outfield, we need a starting center fielder. I don't think that Adolis Garcia or Eli White are going to be the options here, and so I was looking at potentially upgrading in the outfield as well. But now it's time to offer Trevor Story outright, and I wanted to make sure that we had the right piece for him here. I think 6 years, $180.3 million with a club option, so we're locked in for 5 years. We pick up the club option and can potentially move on from him then, and we're going to front load this contract. I'll show you in a little bit what our budget looks like, but basically we have no committed money going forward, and so I wanted to go ahead and front load that, take advantage of the fact that we still have a lot of very cheap players, and get the bulk of his contract out of the way so that in the future, if we needed to trade him, it would be much easier to do that because he wouldn't have a ton of money still on the books. So I figured let's go ahead and front load this contract. Let's eat as much salary as we can while we're cheap and while he's still really successful. And then if we need to make a move down the line, I felt like it was just good business to go ahead and free us up to do that. So he's looking for $31 million a year. We're going to give him just under that at $30 million. But he also gets to come close to home. As you see in the region, He's a Dallas native. He would get to come back here to Arlington, and I felt like that was really the right fit for us going forward. Next up is the arbitration eligible cases, and David Dahl is the headliner here. I told you at the end of last episode when he hit that home run against Garrett Cole that I was almost locked into a guaranteed starting offer for him, and we're going to make that a reality this season. David Dahl will play left field for us and be an everyday starter both against righties and lefties, and I could have gone to arbitration here, but decided, you know what, let's go ahead and give him just a full offer. He's earned it. Let's keep him happy, and let's pay him a little bit. He's only 28 years old, and still in the prime of his career. He had a personal best season last year for us, and this is a guy who's been an all-star in Colorado. So to see the production that he gave us, I was absolutely thrilled to get that, and we're going to reward him with a nice contract here in 2022. You look at his numbers, he's still progressing. The hitting that he's done has really improved, and I thought that set up well for us going forward. The other guy that I really wanted to keep was Taylor Hearn. Hearn had a fantastic 2021, and that 3.04 ERA actually went up towards the end of the season. He was really under 2 for the vast majority of it and went 7-1 out of the bullpen. Hearn's not a guy that I think is going to be an impact in the starting capacity like the Rangers hoped when they first acquired him, but still, you look at his overall ratings and he's certainly improving. He's only 25 years old, so I think he's going to continue to develop at least a little bit more. But with so much team control over Taylor Hearn, I decided that it was probably going to be better to offer him arbitration rather than just extend him. He's not a superstar, and so at the end of the day, I think keeping him as cheap and as long-term as we can is the move to go. So we are breaking the Rangers' normal policy of not going to arbitration, but that's fine. It's what makes sense in this scenario. I'm a little bit worried that this price point, so I'm going to offer him $1 million. I'm a little bit worried that he's going to highball that because he was so good this year. But in the end, I decided to just go ahead and risk it and offer Hearn salary arbitration for $1 million. I looked at Manuel Margot, Brett Martin, and Matt Bush. And Matt Bush, I know for sure we're not bringing back. Manuel Margot, I really had to think about. He's still a young player, only 27 years old, played a decent right field for us, and overall, he's still developing. At the same time, though, I think that there's actually room to improve, and my thought going into this season was if we get Trevor Story, what we can do is we can actually go ahead and move Anderson Tejada into right field. Kind of like what the Rangers did with Joey Gallo. He was more of a natural outfielder anyway, and so I don't know that that's the case with Anderson Tejada, but he's not defensively good enough to play third base. So we'll move him and hopefully get Trevor Story. Brett Martin was another guy that I looked at, and at first, I wasn't totally sold on bringing him back. We have a number of left-handed arms in the bullpen already, but the more that I thought about it, as you see Matt Bush's stats, we're definitely not bringing him back. The more that I thought about Brett Martin, the more that I leaned into potentially offering him arbitration. And again, I don't really know that he's going to be worth what he's going to submit, and so it all depends on how the panel decides. But I decided to lowball Brett Martin. He didn't have a great year. He's just a guy that has been decent out of the bullpen. Again, he's still a young pitcher. And so I thought at the end of the day, there's no reason not to offer him arbitration. And if we need to move on from him later, I'm sure we can trade him. Here's a list of all the players that are either contract renewable or just out of contract period. I'm not going to show you re-signing all of these guys. I just kind of wanted to show you the general list. And once we get through the signing period, I'll show you basically who didn't get a contract offer. Just about everybody will. And, I feel good about where our organization is right now. From top to bottom, from the major leagues all the way down to the guys that we have stashed in single A, I really like the direction that we're heading with this program. And so I think keeping on the vast majority of these guys is going to be the move that keeps us moving forward in a productive standpoint. So now you get to see who we've offered contracts to at this point. I'll just speed through this. Like I said, just about everybody got an offer, and most guys I tried to keep as cheap as they possibly could. You see a lot of 1-year offers, a couple of 2-year offers sprinkled in, but the guys that did not get contracts were Jimmy Harriet, DeMarcus Evans, and Luis Ortiz. Back to free agency we go, and Carlos Martinez was a guy that I looked at. He's not had a great last couple of years in St. Louis. Obviously, the 9.9 ERA in the COVID-affected season. Certainly picked it up a little bit last year, 4.45 ERA, 7-6 in 32 games started for the Cardinals. And he's a guy that I feel like could come in and at least be the number 2 here for a little bit. Maybe the number 3 guy eventually, but he's a pitcher that I think there's still some tread left on these tires. Obviously, he's very, very good at keeping the ball inside the ballpark. He's got good velocity and good break on his pitches. And I figured, why not give him a chance to come in and earn a starting job? Now, obviously, we are not interested in a long-term contract for him. I wanted to keep it to as few years as possible, so ideally it would be 2. And then, if he wants $4.9 million, we can keep it right around that. Again, this is a cheap organization right now, and I think we can get him for that target price. So we offered him the 2 years, $9.3 million. And I think if Carlos will sign with us, we'll be in a very, very good place for the next couple of seasons. I also looked at bolstering our bullpen, and Kendall Graveman pitched for the Mariners last season. He's a guy that's been all over the American League West, a former starter with the Oakland A's for the last several seasons, and then he's been in the bullpen for the Mariners for the last 2 primarily. You see, he just started 2 games in 2020 before the Mariners realized, hey, starting's not your thing. Let's bring you out of the bullpen. In real life, Kendall Graveman is actually having a tremendous season. He's a sinker ball pitcher that keeps the ball normally on the ground and can keep hitters off balance. And so I was looking at Kendall to go ahead and make an offer. Again, a very cheap, short-term offer. And hopefully he could be another righty that steps into our bullpen, adds some versatility there in the late innings to where we're not always having to go to a guy like Spencer Patton or Hunter Wood, lower rated pitchers. I wanted a guy who had done this a little bit before and done so at a high level to add to the back end of our pen. Looking at the contracts that we've offered so far, and Story, Martinez, and Graveman are obviously the headlines. Connor Blair and Jamie Aiea are minor leaguers that I wanted to add to the organization. Obviously, the regression when you're a free agent in this game is killer, and so basically you kind of have to sign these guys and then stash them and hope that they turn things around. Jamie Aiea is a guy that I don't necessarily need for our organization, but I'll just tell you right now, he does end up signing with us, and I traded him, I think, to the Milwaukee Brewers. He was a guy that I always planned to sign and then trade for a throwaway prospect, but I wanted to put him in someone's organization because I think that he has a lot of development to do, and I think that he could be a guy, especially with those hitting stats, that you see at a big league level down the line. It's just going to take a little bit of time, and I thought it was, good to see some of those prospects get signed and put in other organizations. So the first real signing that we start to see rolls in, Roberto Perez signs with the Marlins for 2 years, $25 million. That's the first domino to fall, and now I start to wonder if we're going to have a lot more guys start to make their signing. Jay Valdez does accept the Rangers' offer for the manager for the next 3 years, so that was a huge piece that we had to tie up. Our coaching staff is now officially set going forward. Jay Valdez entrenched as the manager spot, and he's a guy that I hope brings a lot of youth and excitement to this team. Kirby Yates then signed a 1-year, $7.2 million deal. That was a lot cheaper than I thought he was going to sign for, so I think the Twins got excellent value there. We're still leading the race for Trevor Story, although the San Francisco Giants have entered the chat. They have actually given him a little bit bigger offer because it's over 7 years. Our average annual average value is still higher, and so I think that's why he's preferring us, not to mention the fact that it would also be coming home to the state of Texas, where, like I've said, he's from. Couple of re-signings to make you aware of as Chris Bryant returns to the Cubs on a nice deal, Conforto back to the Mets, and Sean Murphy goes to the A's. We simulate the next day, and Texas has done it. Their franchise cornerstone for the next 6 seasons has inked a deal. Trevor Story returns to the Lone Star State on a 6-year, $180.3 million offer. I'm so excited to have him as our franchise shortstop going forward. You look at his numbers: 276, 22 home runs, and 74 RBIs. Can also steal a little bit. 20 bags swiped for the Irving native. And this is the kind of move that I hope the Rangers make in real life. You need to go make a statement, something that says we're serious about contending down the line. And I think signing Trevor Story is a no-brainer for the franchise going forward. So that's what we did. Buster Posey signs a 1-year, $13.5 million deal with the Washington Nationals. That is a major move for Washington, a team that missed the postseason last year. And even though Posey's 35 years old, his stats do not bear that out whatsoever. So I think that the Nationals are going to get that tread that's still on the tires of Buster Posey. Looking at the free agents around the list and the guys that we've signed, Carlos Martinez also signed with us. There wasn't a notification for him for some reason, but he has joined our staff, as has Kendall Graveman. So we have a piece at shortstop, we get a piece in our starting rotation, and we also get Kendall Graveman to add to that bullpen staff. I think the postseason certainly shaking out well for the Texas Rangers. So I did look at possibly bringing Delino DeShields back. Like I mentioned, I'm not set on who's going to win that starting center field job yet, so I wanted to keep my eyes peeled for Delino. Simulate forward a couple more days, and Javi Baez is going to the Atlanta Braves. He's staying in the National League, but he's going to the East to play for Atlanta. He had a really solid season last year, but the Cubs not willing to pay him $50+ million, so he's headed to ATL. And I'm not really sure what the Cubs are doing at shortstop. I know who they end up putting at second base is Miami claims John King off waivers from us. I had to designate him for assignment to make a roster spot for Kendall Graveman. So John King headed to Miami as well. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the Cubs do up the middle. And like I said, I'll take you guys around some of the highlights of where lineups end up shaking out once we get to opening day. I want you guys to know where different franchise players are so they don't just disappear for you down the line. The Mets offered us Taijuan Walker for Kohei Arihara next, and at first I was going to reject this trade offer, but the more that I looked into it, I actually found it appealing. What the Mets are trying to do isn't offload Taijuan Walker because they don't believe in him, but when I looked at their budget, I think what they're trying to do is actually clear cap space. Taijuan Walker and Kohei Arihara are about the same overall. They're almost the same age. Arihara is a couple of years older than him, but had a really good season. And the Mets are just looking to free up cash. Arihara is $6.7 million cheaper than Taijuan Walker is. And so like I said, at first I was going to reject this because I just kind of figured it doesn't really make any sense. But the more I did the research, Taijuan Walker actually does make sense for the Mets to trade. And for them to target Kohei Arihara makes even more sense. They're just trying to free up that money. When you look at who's in their starting rotation, 7.7 for them is a lot to be paying a guy who might not even win the 5th starter role in their rotation. So at the end of the day, I actually decided that this was going to be beneficial for us, and I would pull the trigger. We now will get Taijuan Walker, and actually with his addition, I have an idea of something that I want to potentially do. I don't know that Taijuan Walker is actually going to end up pitching for us. I might move him down the line for another guy that I have in the back of my head. But still, even if we do have to keep him, Taijuan Walker, not a bad option, and he would immediately become the best pitcher on our starting staff. So, thank you so much to Kohei Arihara for the work that he did last year, but I do think that this move made sense for both teams. And again, you'll see why I really was excited about getting Taijuan Walker in just a minute. We continue on simulating, and a bombshell gets dropped. The Athletics receive Jose Altuve and Garrett Stubbs from the Astros for Sean Murphy, who had just re-signed with the Oakland A's. I don't really understand this trade. I don't know if Houston is trying to get cheaper or if they're just trying to get younger at second base. But Jose Altuve now goes to a rival contender, the worst team in Major League Baseball last season, but the A's making a statement that they are no longer going to be in the cellar. At least that's not their intention moving forward. I was absolutely stunned by this trade deal, and honestly, I kind of like it. I kind of like him getting out of Houston. It shakes up things in the series a little bit, and it'll make the games against the Astros and the A's kind of fresh and exciting. You're going to have some new look players there. I was offered another trade for Adolis Garcia. I've cut out basically 6 or 7 trade offers that I've been sent for Adolis. The Yankees really wanted to move on from Justin Wilson. The Padres really wanted to move on from Yu Darvish, and I kept getting those trades sprinkled in, but I did move on from them. Noah Syndergaard signs for a 4-year, $74.8 million deal with Kansas City. So Syndergaard, Thor, is now in the American League. I absolutely love that move for Kansas City. I think it's a sign of things to come, that with their young core coming up, they want to contend as well. But the A's weren't done, as they signed Roberto Osuna to a 4-year, $42.5 million deal, again proving that they plan to contend. And the other Astro, Carlos Correa, is headed to South Beach, 6 years, $106.8 million for the former Astro. Carlos Correa leaves the AL West. Jake Cronenworth got signed to a 4-year, $1.8 million deal, which is criminally underpaying him. He's an all-star, but because of the service time in MLB The Show, basically the CPU is able to kind of manipulate that, and so literally an all-star with San Diego is getting paid pennies to go play in the Queen City. Taylor Hearn wins his arbitration deal for 1.5, and then Brett Martin wins his for almost 1.8. I was shocked about that because he really didn't have that good of a season, but the CPU awarded him the money. You get a look at other important arbitrations that happened. Cody Bellinger lost his. The Dodgers pay him 17.6. Joey Gallo won his arbitration hearing. He gets 7.7 in the last year of his deal with San Diego. Now you get a look at why I wanted to trade for Taijuan Walker. And I talked about going after Tyler Glasnow a couple of episodes ago. This is the move to truly get an ace for our team over the next couple of seasons, and you can see me trying to put together a deal. Basically, the two for sure pieces were Taijuan Walker and Joe Gatto, a minor league pitcher. I was between Adolis Garcia and Eli White for that final piece, and the reason why this makes sense for both teams is obviously we'll get an ace starting pitcher. The Twins had not committed to Glasnow long term. They offered him arbitration. He got 5.4 for one singular season, whereas basically a part of this offer, I was thinking that it was a guarantee that I would sign Glasnow to a multi-year deal. So I went back and forth on the final piece of this deal, and in the end, decided on Eli White. I really wanted Adolis Garcia to work out in center field, although we don't have a long-term starter there going forward. There's going to be a competition made, and so I traded Eli White as a part of that deal. The Twins accept, and Glasnow is now a starting pitcher. You look at the dollars in our budget going forward, we're right at $100 million for this season, which, if you remember, we were at $40 million last season after the deadline. In the free agency market, I went to Tyler Naquin, looking to shore up our outfield and get another left-handed bat. He's a guy that batted .245 for the Reds a season ago, 12 home runs, 45 RBIs. He's also a Texas kid, went to Texas A&M and became a star at the collegiate level. And I would sign Tyler Naquin to a 1-year, $3.4 million contract. Would also sign Helcris Oliveira. And then to clear up some roster space, I'm going to trade 3 relievers in Ryder Ryan, Elliot Ashbeck, and Justin Anderson over to the White Sox, literally for a flyer. Clint Green is 19 years old, 42 overall. I don't know if he has any big league future, but he's kind of a kid that throws really, really hard, and you maybe could develop into something. So we're going to clear out the roster space, and we're going to take a chance on Clint Green. We're also going to acquire Mark Jones from the Brewers, and this was the trade for Jamie Ayaya that I talked about earlier. Finally, we're going to make one last move, and Evan Skoug will go to the Houston Astros, who now would love some backup catcher help for Pedro Castro. They've got a ton of first basemen in the organization. They just drafted Castro in this last, in the first-year player draft, and we're going to acquire Castro for Evan Skoug. I think Castro's a guy that obviously has a great bat contact-wise right now. His defense certainly needs some help, but the contact is something that I'd like to see develop going forward. Plus, he's only 20 years old, so I thought that made a lot of sense, and we'll go ahead and acquire Pedro Castro. The last thing for us to do now is take a look at what the rotation will look like heading into spring training. And I decided not to film any of spring training. The next episode will be opening day, and I'll kind of fill you in on what happened there. But this is the way that the rotation will look, at least at the beginning of spring training. I interchanged a lot of different guys to make sure that younger players got innings so I could really determine who was going to make the opening day roster and who wasn't. But I wanted to see this orientation of the rotation work out at least through the first 2 or 3 starts for everyone. This will be the 5 starters in some order that we go with to break camp. The relievers were really the ones that were up for grabs. There were a couple of spots that I wanted to have legitimate competitions for. Mackenzie Gore, should he perform decently well, and again, like I said, I'm not going to show spring training, so he performed all right. He will make the major league team and will be a starter with us out of spring training. You look at the guys in the bullpen that are going to get chances here: AJ Alexi, Gregory Santos. Couple of kids that I needed to add to the 40-man roster in order to protect them, and I wanted to see what they could do against big league bats. There's a ton of ways that we could go with the bullpen, and I'll show you how we end up breaking it down once we get to the opening day episode. But I think we're going to be okay this year out of the bullpen. It's just a matter of who shows up and performs when we need them the most. To the starting lineup, and this is the way that it will look heading into spring training. JP Martinez is a guy that I really want to see get a lot of quality at bats there in spring training. And then we've got to figure out who is our starting center fielder. Is it going to be Tyler Naquin? Is it going to be Adolis Garcia? Are they going to platoon? And who's going to separate themselves in that battle? Colton Welker, another kid that I really want to see get good at bats in spring training. We acquired him last season, a part of that Shane Green trade. Josh Young, he's a guy that has a chance to claim a roster spot. Can he be the backup infielder for us? That's going to be a huge key. His defense is okay, but can his bat play at the big league level? For Randy Florentino, another guy that has a chance to potentially be the first catcher called up should anything happen. We've talked about Adolis Garcia. Anderson Tejada is moving to right field. I teased this earlier in the episode. Basically, his bat is good enough to keep in the lineup, and his arm is good enough to play in the outfield. We're going to move him to right field in order to free up that infield spot now for IKF, who will play third base. Yanni Hernandez, a kid who's going to get a chance at shortstop. He'll have a chance to be the backup infielder, and I really do think that this team has a chance to not necessarily surpass what we did in year one, because we weren't expected to do that. That truly was a Cinderella story. But I think we have a chance to be very, very competitive with the Astros, maybe even with the A's, who I think are going to play a lot better this season. And maybe we can win an American League West crown this season. But that's been the off-season episode. I know it's a longer episode. Thank you guys so much for riding with me this long. I think we've done a lot of good this off-season, and I'm so excited to get into 2022 and beyond, see how this team plays, and see how the minor leaguers develop too. Now that we've got our guys in place in the minor leaguers, we're going to play a lot more of those scenarios and pay more attention to them as well. Guys like Hank Lyons, what can they do in their first year of development? I'm actually going to move Hank later. I believe I moved him down to AA, but in the end, I'm really excited about the future of this franchise. And, there's some good-looking free agents, too, so we may not be done making moves. It just kind of depends what all happens. Thank you guys so much for watching. Until next time, so long, everybody.